released today?
It was submitted to them once it was completed. I think probably around the same time it was sent to all of you.
I want to move on. One note that surprised me, I've been on this committee now this is my 13th year. Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security. Obviously, we're aware of occurrences within the environment and how they may impact operations, but we're focused on the direct threats to Americans' safety, well-being, and security.
How about how they will impact mass migration, famine, dislocation, political violence, which is the finding, by the way, of the 2019 annual threat assessment under the first Trump administration? You don't consider that a significant national security threat?
For the intelligence community, being aware of the environment that we're operating in is a given. What I focused this annual threat assessment on, and the IC focused this threat assessment on, are the most extreme and critical direct threats to our national security.
Let me ask a direct question. Who decided climate change should be left out of this report after it's been in the prior 11? Where was that decision
I
made?
gave direction to our team at ODNI to focus on the most extreme and critical national security threats that we face.
Your direction include no comments on climate change?
Senator, as I said, I focused on the most extreme and direct national security threats.
That's not a response to my question. Did you instruct that there be no finding in terms of climate change in this report?
I don't recall giving that instruction.
Final questions in a few short seconds that I have left. You all concede, and it's in the report repeatedly, about the cyber danger from China, from Russia, from Iran. Why then is the administration deconstructing CISA? 130 people fired. The General Hawk talked about the importance of public-private cooperation. That section of CISA seems to have been disestablished. What possible policy reason is there for undermining CISA's relationship to the states with regard to elections and to the private sector with regard to cybersecurity when the cybersecurity threat is only growing? Anybody want to tackle that?
I won't speak for all of my colleagues here, but I don't believe any of us have any insight into those specific staffing decisions that have been made.
Well, let me ask you this question. You've all found, the report has found explicitly growing cyber threats, including to elections from Russia, China, Iran. Do you believe that it's in the national interest to diminish our capacity to deal with those cyber issues? Yes or no?
President Trump is focused on effects and making sure that the people that we have and the resources that we have are focused on our national security. He and his team recognize that more people doesn't necessarily always mean better effects. Those are some of the things that are driving the changes that we're seeing across the administration, is getting all of our agencies back and focused on their core mission.
General Hawk, do you agree that?
Senator King, your time has expired.
Time is up. Thank you.
Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you to all of you for your service to our country. With regard to the issue surrounding Signal, I'm going to address it, but I'm going to address it in the closed session so that we can get more in depth into that issue. In the meantime, I want to direct my first question to Director Ratcliffe. As the debate continues in Washington regarding spectrum, what can you share in this unclassified setting regarding the critical nature of spectrum to national security interests generally?
Thanks for the question, Senator. I know this is an issue of great interest to the Senate, and the potential auction of commercial space on spectrum. Those, as you correctly point out, the discussions about spectrum, I will start out by saying There are national security implications from such an auction were to take place to both the DoD and the IC. I think the discussions that we need to have in a classified setting, I can relate to you that the direction from early meetings that we've had is that the discussion about where that might take place would not affect specifically CIA or IC equities, and I hope that's the case and where the discussion goes. But I think we need to be concerned that a public auction at bands at certain levels would have an impact on our ability to deliver an accurate intelligence picture.
In other words, there are parts of the spectrum which simply cannot be shared with the commercial.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
And we can talk about the specific reasons about why in a classified setting that would cause a diminishment of our ability to deliver a good threat picture to the commander-in-chief.
And in some cases, life or death consequences
Absolutely.
involved. Thank you. Director Patel, first of all, I just want to thank you for what you are doing, and I know that there's a number of items that in your previous life you did that simply can't be discussed, but nonetheless, we've appreciated what you have done for your country already. Today, I just wanted to talk to you about, we've seen a series of public news reports about ISIS threats within the United States. And there have been several successful interdictions, Oklahoma City, Philadelphia, New York. Although the question remains as to the total number of ISIS operatives who were able to breach porous borders in the months and years before policy changes in this January of 2025, to what extent is the FBI tracking operatives who remain in the United States today, and what is the FBI doing to track them down?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your question and your comments. So the priorities at the FBI since I took over have been violent crime and national security, and this speaks directly to national security. The direction for the FBI is to track down any individuals with any terrorist ties whatsoever, whether it be ISIS or another foreign terrorist organization, and now to include the new designations of the cartels down south and elsewhere. So the FBI is utilizing our Joint Terrorism Task Force, which are situated in all 55 field offices. But the key to success there is our partnership with state and local law enforcement who have the ground level intelligence on some of these operatives. And as you've highlighted, we've already shut down numerous threats, and we've identified publicly where permissible these threats and individuals and where they're coming from. And I think the FBI is doing a very good job right now in collecting this information through our interagency process. And we will continue to thwart every bad actor affiliated with a terrorist organization or otherwise.
Thank you. And Director Hawk, first of all, look, you've talked a little bit already about Salt Typhoon, but what I want to really get into is the things that are moving right now that you haven't had a chance to address, and in particular, Cybercom 2.0 and the need to accelerate that particular plan moving forward. Can you talk just briefly? I've got 40 seconds left. Talk to us a little bit about how critical 2.0 is in terms of countering the cyber activity that's going on through nefarious actors.
Senator, what we were asked to do by Congress was to look at what's the force generation model for the Department of Defense to be able to generate cyber forces. Based off of that request, I produced a recommendation for the Secretary that outlined 3 critical things, which is really how we manage the talent, how we develop the talent in the department, and also how we equip that talent underpinned by compute and AI. We've brought that plan initially back to Secretary Hegseth. He told us to go faster. We've delivered him that plan. And now, based off of his guidance, we will now begin to move forward with the rest of the department.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for holding this hearing, and thank you for being here. Mr. Director Ratcliffe, it sounds to me like your testimony today and the Secretary and the DNI's testimony is that there was nothing wrong at all with the signal thread that you were on, that it didn't include any targeting information or battle sequence. That is your testimony. That's your testimony. And I'm a little staggered that that is your view, Director Ratcliffe. Does the CIA have any rules about handling of classified information? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, Director Radcliffe. Do you agree, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said this morning when asked by members of the press what had happened, he said this morning in Hawaii that Atlantic Editor-in-Chief Jeff Goldberg is a, quote, deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of providing hoaxes time and time again. Do you share that evaluation, the Secretary of Defense's evaluation of Jeff Goldberg as a journalist?
Senator, I didn't see those comments. I don't know Jeff Goldberg.
So do you share that view of the Secretary of Defense?
Well, I don't have a view on.
Okay. Assuming that he has that view, I'm curious about whether you are the CIA director. Okay, this has happened. We know it's happened. Did Jeff Goldberg somehow, did he create a hoax that allowed him to become part of this signal thread? Please answer the question. You don't insult the intelligence of the American people. Did he invite himself to the signal thread?
I don't know how he was invited, but clearly he was added.
Clearly it was. Finish your sentence, please.
Clearly he was added to the signal group. Your question is,
you don't know that the president's national security advisor invited him to join the signal thread? Everybody in America knows that. Does the CIA director not know that?
I've seen conflicting reports about who added the reporter to the signal messaging group.
You think that it's perfectly appropriate that there was a reporter added, especially one that the Secretary of Defense says is deceitful, highly discredited, a so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes over and over again? Is your testimony that it was appropriate that he was added to this signal thread?
No, of course not. And
why
Senator,
did you not call?
Well, hold on, Senator. You're mischaracterizing my testimony.
Good. You answered the question. Let me ask you. When he was added to the thread, you're the CIA director. Why didn't you call out that he was present on the signal thread?
I don't know if you use signal messaging app.
I do. Not for classified information, not for targeting.
Well, neither
not
do I,
for
Senator.
Anything remote.
Neither do I, Senator.
Well, that's what your testimony is today.
It absolutely is not, Senator. Were you not listening at the beginning?
No.
When I said that I was using it as permitted, it is permissible to use.
I agree that's your testimony.
Yeah.
I agree that's your testimony. You asked me if I use it, and I said not for targeting, not for classified information.
And I said I don't either.
I also know Jeff Goldberg. I don't use it to communicate with him, but you thought it was appropriate. By the way, I think he's one of the more outstanding journalists in America, but I'm shocked to find him on a thread that he's reading in the parking lot of a grocery store in Washington, D.C., and your testimony as the director of the CIA is that it's totally appropriate. No. Is it appropriate?
No,
that the president.
That is not what I.
Okay,
when did I say it was?
Please.
When did I use the word appropriate?
Well, go ahead, please.
Well, I didn't.
That everybody in America.
So clearly,
there's nothing to
Senator,
see here is what your testimony is.
No, I never said that.
This is just a normal day at the CIA where we chat about this kind of stuff over signal. In fact, it's so normal that the last administration left it here for us. That's your testimony today.
That's your testimony.
No, that's
Senator.
not my testimony. That's what you said.
I didn't say any of those things that you just related, Senator.
I heard you say it. We'll let the American people decide. Let me ask you one final point.
Mischaracterized
I'm out of time.
it. Well, are you going to give me a chance?
Is it appropriate? Did you know that the president's Middle East advisor was in Moscow on this thread while you were, as director of the CIA, participating in this thread? Were you aware of that? Are you aware of that today?
I'm not aware of that today.
This sloppiness, this incompetence, this disrespect for our intelligence agencies and the personnel who work for them is entirely unacceptable. It's an embarrassment.
Senator?
You need to do better. You need to do better. Thank you. I'm being gavelled by the Chairman, and I apologize for going over my time.
Senator Young.
Thank you all for being here. I'll be asking some follow-up questions, clarifications about this Signal episode in a closed setting, and try and work with all of you to bring clarity to that situation. It appears to me there's some unanswered questions. It'll take some time, I think, to get there in a more dispassionate setting. Director Gabbard, I'm going to begin today asking you some questions about emerging technology. This has been a real point of emphasis, I know, of our broader national security community for a period of time. We know that PRC is making generational investments in certain emerging tech, AI, biotech, and other areas of technology to reduce their vulnerability against any supply chain disruptions and to lead the world in some areas. As the IC assesses, the PRC is seeking to, quote, become a global S&T superpower, surpass the United States, promote self-reliance, and achieve further economic, political, and military gain. So, Director Gabbard, can you describe the actions China is taking to operationalize that IC assessment in ways that directly target the security and prosperity of everyday Americans?
Senator, what we know is that they are trying to use these capabilities as a means to continue to exploit vulnerabilities within our own critical infrastructure and our cyber technology. The critical infrastructure is a key area of concern given what we know has already been exploited, these asymmetric attacks that have been placed within our critical infrastructure that are of serious concern given how they could be exploited, especially during a time of conflict. We know that they are experiencing a boom in their generative AI capability and are competing very heavily against our own AI capabilities. Obviously, AI can and will be used across a multitude of every sector of our society, both here as we are in our own country, and we expect China to be able to continue to do the same there.
So two key areas of vulnerability to the United States, conceivably, susceptibility to cyber attacks, and as China's leveraging of AI towards misinformation, increasingly into the physical realm, they can pose threats to us as well. As follow-up, Director Ratcliffe, you know, we've had Huawei, we've had TikTok. What do you believe will be the next point of technological friction and competition between the U.S. and China? What should members of Congress be looking for? Senator, I think I can answer this question more fully in the classified setting. What I would say is it relates to the issue of emerging technologies and matters of quantum computing and quantum sensing, and our ability to stay ahead of China on the technological curve with respect to those issues. I'd be happy to get into that in further detail in a classified setting. Excellent. We'll dive into that. Director Haw, General, how do you see biotech playing into this broader competition?
I think it's an area that, from our perspective, has increasingly been a priority as we want to understand the approach that China's taken, and also to ensure that as we think about the president's priorities in terms of both economic and technology security, we are certainly, as a community, following DNI's guidance, that we are increasingly putting our resources to be able to ensure that we understand where China is investing in those resources and how that will impact our economy and overall the overall health of our national security.
Thank you, General. Director Gabbard, not a lot of time left on this end, but I do have a little crypto interest I wanted to communicate to you. Can you share with this committee how we're positioned to disrupt foreign cyber efforts to steal cryptocurrency, such as the North Koreans have successfully done. If others would like to pull this thread and weigh in on this question very briefly, that would be great.
Senator, we're obviously aware of North Korea's revenue generating by stealing cryptocurrency has had a significant effect on North Korea's capabilities. I defer to our technical experts on the actions that are being taken.
Senator, I think this would be a great topic when we go to closed session.
It's going to be a busy closed
Agreed.
setting. Yes. Director Patel?
I agree with the general. In closed session, I can provide some details.
It's what you get when you visit with a bunch of spies. All right, Chairman.
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to come back to the topic of the day here, the signal chain as reported by The Atlantic. Ms. Gabbard and Mr. Ratcliffe, you each testified that there was no information operational in nature, no classified information. So I want to ask each of you just a series of, just respond yes or no. I'll start with Ms. Gabbard. In the signal chain that we have been talking about, was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Any generic target?
I believe there was discussion around targets in general.
Mr. Ratcliffe?
I think that's consistent with my recollection. Again, I don't have access to that. But
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
I'm not talking about specific, any weapon or weapons system.
I don't recall specific names of systems or weapons being used or named within the
Well, I'm
chat.
not asking whether, I don't want you to tell me what the specific weapon was, but any weapon at all. Mr. Ratcliffe, same question.
I don't recall.
How about anything about timing? Ms. Gabbard?
I don't recall specific timing.
Was there any
I
mention?
won't get into the detail of the conversation, but obviously there was a significant amount of planning and internal discussions that had occurred prior to and outside of this signal chat.
Mr. Ratcliffe, you're nodding your head. Any mention of any military unit whatsoever? Mr. Ratcliffe?
Not that I recall.
Ms. Gabbard?
Not that I recall.
Okay, so I understand that DoD policy prohibits discussion of even what is called controlled unclassified information, or CUI, on unsecured devices. Are both of you aware of that DoD policy?
I haven't read that policy.
Not familiar with the DoD policy, but I would say that the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority for DoD in deciding what would be classified information.
Ms. Gabbard, does the intelligence community have a policy that prohibits discussion of controlled unclassified information?
Yes.
It does. Okay. Controlled unclassified information, according to DoD, includes information that is information that has not been approved for public release. Would you, of what's been disclosed publicly of the signal chain, would either of you feel that that would be approved for public release? Ms. Gabbard.
The discussion that took place in that signal chat group was a conversation reflecting national security leaders and the vice president around the president's objectives.
So yes or no, would you approve that for public release?
I don't feel I can answer that question here.
Because of the nature of this hearing?
Because of the nature of a private discussion that took place between individual leaders in our government.
it would make sense that you would not approve it for public release, wouldn't it?
There are other factors that would
Okay.
go into that consideration.
Mr. Ratcliffe, yes or no?
I wouldn't approve the release of classified information. Again, as I've said, my
I'm not talking about
understanding is that-
classified information, Mr. Ratcliffe. I'm talking about information that has not been approved for public release. That is information that is considered controlled, unclassified information.
The principals that would have been on that would have been individuals capable of approving that for public release.
I got 20 seconds. The deliberation as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country, would you consider that classified information, Ms. Gabbard?
Well, the information was not classified.
I'm not talking about this. I'm just talking about deliberation from principals as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country. Would you consider that classified information? I'm not talking about what happened this week.
There are other factors that would go into determining that classification.
Mr. Ratcliffe, the deliberation between principals in our national security apparatus about whether or not to strike another country, would you consider that to be classified information?
Pre-decisional strike deliberation should be conducted through classified channels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, I just want to return, Mr. Ratcliffe, to your answer there in part to Senator Kelly. It's been raised at several occasions now in this hearing about whether classified information was discussed in this chat. And you mentioned about the Secretary of Defense being what you called, I think, the original classification authority.
Correct. Correct.
I think it's important for the public to understand that although you and Director Gabbard are original classification authorities on many matters, you're not that for all matters that might be classified in the government. Is that right?
That's correct.
So if the Secretary of State has classified sensitive diplomatic details, that's his authority. If the Secretary of Energy has sensitive classified information about our national laboratories, that's his authority. And the two of you can't speak to other departments who have their own original classification authority, and which, of course, as Director Gabbard said, ultimately rested with one person, the President of the United States. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. It looks like the Vice Chairman wants to weigh in as well.
Just very briefly. I mean, I think it strains the audience and the watching public's credibility if we're talking about timing, packages, that somehow this would be okay to put out, or just, frankly, senior American officials trashing Europe. I've been around this for a while. This is not information you generally put out. And the notion there's not even acknowledgement of, hey, gosh, we screwed up, is stunning to me. And the idea somehow, well, none of this was classified, but we can't talk about it here. You can't have it both ways.
I think the witness's point is that they can't speak for every official in the government who has original classification authority.
Chairman, I don't, that's not what I'm not trying to litigate that. I'm trying to litigate on the face unless, as Senator Bennett said, this reporter is somehow making this all up. And I think the White House has acknowledged that the text chain that he submitted was authentic. It strains my mind to think, again, it strains my mind if the shoe had been on the other foot, what my colleagues would be saying about this. And again, we're going to get to the bottom of it. And I appreciate your comments, but you guys have both testified under law. There's nothing classified in that information. There's nothing, in a sense, I've not heard either one of you say, gosh, we screwed up. So we'll find out. This is too important to our national security. And again, I know we've got more members to cross.
They testified, is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's no intelligence community classified information. Is that correct?
That's
Director
correct.
Ratcliffe, is that correct? Director Gabbard?
Yes, Chairman.
Well, again,
That's not correct. She said repeatedly there's nothing classified, period.
right, period. You can't have it both. And again, we'll see. I cannot believe this is not going to come out. And if it's not classified, again, we'd ask you to give it to the public today. I'm sure one of your aides back there probably got it on paper. If you got it here, it's not classified, stand by your position. Or is this just one more example of a careless approach to how we keep our secrets in this administration?
With apologies to Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I want to explore a little bit about Ukraine, and I'll direct this to Director Ratcliffe or Director Cruz. The ATA assesses that, quote, the grinding war of attrition in Ukraine, quote, will lead to a gradual but steady erosion of Kyiv's positions on the battlefield. Are Ukrainian forces at any significant risk of collapse this year?
Before I turn it over to Director Ratcliffe, I think both sides are working through the equipment that they need, the industrial base they need to support that, and the personnel that are required to man all of that equipment and man the front lines. And as we see the battle space in the various portions, whether it's in Kursk, whether it's in any of the 4 oblasts, we see areas where Kyiv will struggle to prevent the slow attritional grind. We do not see an imminent collapse in any of the line of control battle spaces at this point.
And then vice versa. That answers my question, unless you want to add something, Director. Whatever advantages in manpower and material they have, can Russia maintain its operational tempo without significant changes to how it's conducting the war?
I think our assessment from a military perspective is that Russia has the ability to sustain its campaign longer than Kyiv would. Now, when that timeline hits, we do not have an assessment of, but I believe that if this were to go on for more than the remainder of this year, both sides would have a significant challenge maintaining their defense industrial base as well as their operational ops tempo.
Longer than this year?
That is correct, and they will each have difficulty at various points throughout the spring, summer, and fall as well.
Thank you. Director Ratcliffe, ATA says continuing the Russia-Ukraine war perpetuates strategic risks to the United States of unintended escalation to large-scale war and heightened insecurity among NATO allies. What are the strategic risks to the United States if Russia were to achieve its maximalist objectives via peace agreement?
Achieve via peace agreement?
Yes.
Well, I think that clearly the negotiations that are going on reflect that President Trump is seeking a cessation of the war on terms that will end the war permanently. From an intelligence community standpoint, and specifically with regard to CIA assets, we've taken steps to support that, the president's goal of an enduring peace. To General Cruz's comments, I agree with his assessment and generally the public assessment that Russia has the battlefield advantage, is grinding forward slowly. I want to comment on that, however, to say that with regard to the Ukrainian resistance, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military have been underestimated for a period of several years now. And ultimately, I'm convinced from my reflections in observing from an intelligence standpoint that they will fight with their bare hands if they have to, if they don't have terms that are acceptable to an enduring peace. Obviously, to the point of maximalist goals, President Trump has communicated that he is aware of the dangers of that, of Russia getting what they want. And I think that the peace talks that are taking place would reflect, if successful, and they are making progress, that both sides would not get everything that they want and no one's maximalist goals would be achieved.
Thank you both. In the short time I have, I'm going to skip a question and ask that I intended to ask, but ask the director of the FBI. Director, I chair the subcommittee that appropriates money for the Department of Justice, including the FBI. It has been our practice that the FBI director as well as the Attorney General appear before our committee each year. And I would want to make certain that you do not foresee any challenges that I will have in your presence when you come to speak when we invite you to come speak about your budget. I think when we visited in the office, you made yourself often available, pleased to talk to Congress. We're getting ready for the appropriations process to begin. The budget that the president intends to submit is seemingly months away, weeks away, long weeks away. And we may ask you to come testify about your priorities now or sooner than that. Is that a challenge for you that I'd be aware of?
From the FBI, no, as long as the Department of Justice and the Attorney General are good with it.
Thank you.
Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Director Ratcliffe, you have repeatedly made the point that there was no classified information contained in any of these discussions that were reported in the Atlantic Monthly. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. So, Senator, what I've related is that any information that was related from my perspective or that I observed from the intelligence perspective was not classified information. With respect to the assertions and the allegations that there was strike packages or targeting information or things that relate to DOD, as I've pointed out, the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority for determining whether something's classified or not. And as I've understood from media reports, the Secretary of Defense has said the information was not classified.
Are you aware that the Secretary of Defense declassified this information prior to the discussion?
I'm not.
Director Gabbard, same question. You've indicated, at least the impression I got, was that there was no classified information discussed. Is that correct?
Senator, my answer is the same as the director of the CIA's.
So the question has to be posed to Secretary Hegseth whether he declassified the information and at what point he did declassify it. Do you agree?
Yes, I defer questions to the Secretary of Defense.
Okay. Director Patel, are you conducting an investigation of these discussions and activities?
Thank you, Senator. As I informed the Vice Chairman on the same question, I found out about this late last night, early this morning, so I don't have an update for you on that.
Well, thank you. When you get an update, we'd appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir.
Director Gabbard, were you overseas during any parts of these discussions?
Yes, Senator, I was.
Were you using your private phone or a public phone for the signal discussions?
I won't speak to this because it's under review by the National Security Council. Once that review is complete, I'm sure we'll share the results with the committee.
What is under review? It's a very simple question. Are you your private phone or an officially issued phone? What could be under review?
National Security Council is reviewing all aspects of how this came to be, how the journalist was inadvertently added to the group chat, and what occurred within that chat across the board.
But so you were not going to disclose anything about whether you use the phone. Director Ratcliffe, there's been indication that the CIA has warned recently retired personnel about the vulnerabilities of Signal and other encrypted messaging applications. If that's the case, why were you discussing these issues on Signal?
Senator, signal use, as I've said repeatedly, is permissible for work purposes. I've never said that end-to-end encryption apps like Signal are a substitute for classified systems, and I was not discussing classified information in this setting.
But as you've indicated previously, perhaps the Secretary of Defense was discussing classified information, and only he can be held accountable in terms of whether it was classified or declassified at the point when he spoke. Is that accurate?
Well, I didn't say it that way. I said the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority, and my understanding is that his comments are that any information that he shared was not classified.
But you have no way to verify that?
I don't.
Again, this is a very troubling example and a great lapse in our intelligence and our discussion. One further point. If you are not aware of any classified information on the discussions back and forth, would it be appropriate for the author to release the entire text of what he heard or transcribed?
I think the author has released, my understanding, essentially almost all of the information as it's been related to me. I don't know what calculation the author made with regard to what information would be released or not.
Well, he
but again, I can again confirm that with respect to the communications that were related, as to me, there was no classified information.
According to the article, quote, the message contained information that might be interpreted as related to actual and current intelligence operations, and the author did not disclose that information. So the question would be, if he disclosed everything he heard, in your view.
That wouldn't be classified information. I know the context of what that is, and I think the author said might be interpreted as related to intelligence information. It was not classified information.
So it goes back to my point. If he released all this information he did not release, he could do so without any liability at the federal level.
I think you're asking for a legal answer that I'm not able to give you, but.
Mr. Patel, can you opine? You're a lawyer and you're the director of the FBI. Would he face any legal liability if he released the information?
Because of the questions you and the Vice Chairman have put to me, I'm not going to prejudge the situation, and that legal call is ultimately for the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for joining us and for your service. Just to make sure I understand some of the basics here, so Director Ratcliffe, you were a member of the Houthi PC small group signal chain, correct?
I was.
Yeah, and so were the Vice President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the National Security Advisor, and Ms. Gabbard, correct?
I believe so. I don't have a list of who was invited to be on.
And so was national political reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, correct?
I don't know that.
Yes, you do.
I don't know Jeffrey Goldberg, and I've already testified. I don't know whether or how he was added.
Okay, well, he was a member of the signal chain, and the discussion included the Vice President's private opinion on the wisdom of proposed U.S. strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Vance, quote, I think we are making a mistake. I am not sure the President is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There was a strong argument for delaying this a month. You don't recall?
I don't, as you
You don't recall seeing that?
read that, I don't.
It included the private opinions of the Secretary of Defense on the timing of strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Director Ratcliffe, surely you prepared for this hearing today. You were part of a group of principals, senior echelons of the U.S. government, in now a widely publicized breach of sensitive information. You don't recall whether the Vice President opined on the wisdom of the strikes? That's your testimony today under oath?
In that setting, I don't recall.
Here's what Secretary Hegseth said, quote, waiting a few weeks or months does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms. Your testimony is you don't recall the Secretary of Defense sending that message or reading it?
I recall there being an exchange. I don't recall the specifics as you're reading it.
Well, let's put it this way, Director Ratcliffe, a discussion by senior U.S. officials on the timing and risks of a proposed military campaign and disagreements between the President and the Vice President about U.S. plans and intentions would be of obvious interest to foreign intelligence services, would it not?
Yes.
And they were discussing the timing of sending U.S. air crews into enemy airspace where they faced an air defense threat, correct?
I'm going to, Senator, defer to the other principles that you're referring to about what the meaning and the context of
They're
what they were
talking about the
auditing.
timing of U.S. airstrikes, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and therefore the timing of sending U.S. air crews into hostile airspace, correct?
Yes.
And therefore the time period during which enemy air defenses could target U.S. air crews flying in enemy airspace, correct?
I don't know that.
You do know that. Let me ask this question, General Hawk. You lead America's signals intelligence collection. Would the private deliberation of foreign senior officials about the wisdom and timing of potential military action be a collection priority for you and the U.S. intelligence community?
Senator, it's our job to do indications and warning for both the plans and intentions of adversary leaders and for military commanders.
And would not information about the timing of airstrikes allow a military to pre-position or cue air defense systems to shoot down enemy aircraft?
I think, Senator, from our perspective, any advance warning is something that we certainly are trying to protect.
Yeah. Director Ratcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
A national political...
Hold on.
No, you
Let me
hold
answer.
on. No, Director
The
Ratcliffe, I
reason
asked you a
say
yes or
no-
no question, and now you'll hold on. A national political reporter
You can
was made
characterize it how
privy-
you want.
was made privy
The White
to
House has
sensitive
made
information
clear
about
that there
imminent
was an
military
inadvertent
operations against a
mistake,
foreign terrorist
An inadvertent
organization.
mistake of adding a reporter.
And that wasn't a huge
to a
mistake?
seal.
That wasn't a huge mistake?
Well, I think they characterize
This is
it
an
as a
embarrassment.
mistake.
This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology. There has been no recognition of the gravity of this error. And by the way, we will get the full transcript of this chain, and your testimony will be measured carefully against its content. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the witnesses again for their appearance today. I sense the Vice Chairman has something to add.
I do.
So I will recognize him briefly.
Well, again, I thank the witnesses. But what you're saying doesn't make sense on the face of it. Everybody knows, at least Director Ratcliffe, you had the courtesy of acknowledging you were on the chain. Director Gabbard wouldn't even touch that, even though we've got our initials. And if you want a comparison, think back to the beginning of the Ukraine war, when the United States, in concert with our then ally, the United Kingdom, declassified a lot of Putin's battle plans that allowed the Ukrainians to push back successfully on the Russian invasion. How was that? That was gone through a real process of declassification. As Senator Ossoff so clearly made the point, this information out, potentially where our adversary could reposition its defenses, in the unwillingness of the individuals on this panel who are on the chat to even apologize or acknowledging what a colossal screw-up this is, speaks volumes.
Thank you to our witnesses for your appearance. A few administrative matters. As I mentioned earlier, Senator Collins is under the weather. She regrets that she could not be here for your testimony. Senator Risch, likewise, had to preside over a hearing of the Foreign Relations Committee to include the nomination of my former governor, Mike Huckabee, a great American and a great friend of Israel, to be the next ambassador to Israel. He also regrets that he could not be here. I anticipate he may have written questions as well. I would urge you all to respond to those promptly. Now, the audience will remain seated while our witnesses and their aides depart the hearing room. The Capitol Police will ensure this occurs. I want to commend the Capitol Police and our committee security staff for running an orderly hearing today. For the benefit of members, the vote on the floor has been called. We will adjourn this open hearing and we will reconvene in closed setting at 12:40 p.m. The hearing is adjourned.